When God of War 2018 came out, I was skeptical at first. I thought it was going to be about Kratos being old and past his prime with a bum knee, talking about how cool he was back in the day. But it was obviously way better than that. In fact, it's probably one of the best games I've ever played. And so naturally, I was very excited for Ragnarok. The question posed in this video, however, is, did it deliver? How good is God of War Ragnarok? Okay, so firstly, let's just get this out of the way. The game is obviously very, very good looking. It's just straight up gorgeous. But as we all should know, graphics aren't everything. So let's dig a little deeper than that. So what is it like to once again play as Kratos, the god of emotional baggage? I mean war. Okay, this is obviously going to have a bunch of spoilers in, so beware. And with that being said, let's talk about the opening fight. And not the one with Freya, although that is a very cool scene. I'm talking about the fight with Thor. And holy shit, is this a good fight. They teased it at the end of the first one, and here we are ready to fight old Thunderfires himself. I mean seriously, look at this fucking guy. He's built like a fucking wardrobe. And you can really feel that in the fight because it's just a massive clash of brute force versus brute force. And to be honest, it's not the fight itself that's so good, it's like the mini cutscenes in between. Although you could say that about the entirety of this game. The cutscenes are definitely the highlight. Speaking of highlights, let's talk about the two best parts of this fight. One being the death fake out where he revives you afterwards and starts shit talking. You gotta respect that, come on. That's a big dick move right there. And then probably my favourite part is when hammer and axe collides and creates a frozen lightning bolt. Not only does it look amazing and it stays there the entirety of the game, but there's some cool symbolism there as well. It could symbolise how that when these gods fight, it changes the world forever. Or it could symbolise that, just like the lightning that's frozen, Kratos' inner rage is being subdued and kept away, waiting to be let out. Or it could just be like a cool visual thing, you know, whatever. But now let's talk about the introduction to the characters of Thor and Odin. As I've said before, visually, perfect. I love how they have Thor with this extra fat, like he's a strong man or something. He looks like a shaved bear and someone you don't want to fuck with. And Odin's design is great too. Despite being this amazing like god king, his design is very subtle, which matches his personality perfectly. He's this schemer, someone that will backstab you, someone whose intentions are never quite what they seem. However, I'm not so sure about their accents.
Yeah, his mind was gone, sure. But he had his uses and now he's gone because of you.
And I don't mean the voice acting, don't get me wrong, the whole cast did an amazing job. I just mean specifically the accents. Because they just sound too American. It doesn't feel like I'm talking to Norse gods.
Don't we? Don't we? Make a good damn team?
It feels like I'm talking to some old Brooklyn gangster and his big fat goon. Now I'm not saying they should be talking like,
I'm a Swedish plumber, I'm here to fix your pipes. That's good, that's a good accent.
but surely there's some middle ground there, like the Nords in Skyrim. But I suppose, if giving them a different accent would negatively impact their performance, I suppose just stick with what he can do.
Exactly.
But after the intro, and the game fully gives you the reins, it's when you realise that this game is basically the exact same as the first game. When you get to a lake with loads of little islands with little side quests to do, and there's a big monster in the middle of the lake, it all feels very familiar. But honestly, I think that's fine, because it's mainly a story driven game. As long as they keep the same quality of narrative and tone, we're good. Speaking of tone, they really set the tone early on in the game, when Fenrir dies in Atreus' arms, and then we find some bear cubs that are orphans because of us. And they're gonna die, we know that, and there's nothing we can do. You just have to swallow your sadness and move on. Another really great instance of this is a very early side quest where you have to free this whale that's been imprisoned under this lake for like hundreds of years, and imprisoned by Mimir himself.
This creature, you enslaved it.
Aye.
And the whole time he's talking about his regrets and how much he was a fool and how much he hates what he did. And it's a great reflection of another person who is ashamed of their past, just like Kratos. It adds even more depth to the character of Mimir. And to top it all off, did we save the whale? Not really. I mean, physically, yeah, we free it. But then they hit you with,
Why is it not moving? It has grown accustomed to its chains.
oh, he's just so conditioned to stay there, he just wants to stay there forever now. And then you feel like shit again. And it really goes to show you can't really fix the past. Sometimes there's not a happy ending, but it's always worth it to try and make a change. And this side quest actually perfectly coincides with a later side quest you get, where in the Alfheim desert there's these giant jellyfish that are trapped underneath the sands, and that's why there's these crazy storms there. But you can actually free them this time, and then they do this really cool dance and they're all happy about being freed. It's beautiful. Good job Kratos, SpongeBob will be proud. Those two are my favourite side quests in the game, I think. Not only were they fun and interesting to do, but they added a little bit more depth to the characters you're playing. Speaking of characters, you'll be happy to know that all your favourite characters from the 2018 game are back in this game. You've got Mimir, you've got Freya, you've got Brock, you've got Sindri. You've got Jormungandr. Shit, even Freya's tortoise house has a cameo. Okay, let's talk about Atreus. In the 2018 game, I hated him. I'm not going to sugarcoat my words, he was an annoying little dick. But hey, this game takes place 2 years later, so he's older now, maybe he's more mature, you know, a little bit less annoying. And yeah, to be fair, he is a lot better now. But to be fair, saying Atreus is better in this game is like saying being slapped in the face is better than being kicked in the dick. I mean, it's technically true, but I don't want either of them. In this game, Atreus is, well, actually, Heimdall, take it away.
I can already see you are eager to prove yourself. Way too eager. Entitled and impulsive.
He do be spitting facts though. I mean, don't get me wrong, the kid means well, he's actually a very nice character. But he's a teenager who's jumped up on all this prophecy talk and being a champion. He still doesn't really listen to his dad or Mimir. It was never going to end well, let's be honest. And Ragnarok is way more about Atreus than the last game was. I mean, you even play as him now. And at first I hated that because I just wanted to play as Kratos. But he can actually do some cool stuff. He's got some cool abilities, he can turn into animals, he can summon animals. His bow leads to a different playstyle of like a more kite heavy type thing instead of just smashing stuff. But as soon as I learned how competent Atreus can be in a fight, it really annoyed me again. Like, where is this when I'm fighting as Kratos? I mean, he just fucking stands there shooting things like once every 5 seconds. I mean, I know he's a bit more helpful than that, especially when you upgrade him, but still, come on. But why can't he just turn into a wolf like once when he's seeing me fucking die over and over again to the same fucking enemies? To be fair, there are some cool moments when you play as him. I am a huge fan of giant monsters in movies and games, so seeing Jormungandr again, oh, it's made my day. And this funny moment where he tries to punch open the chest like his dad, which I think is a good symbol of him still not being ready or old enough to do all this stuff by himself, but he's gonna struggle and try anyway. And then there's this really cool moment where he has this like dream sequence. He sees visions of his younger self and how much of a little dick he was. And I was like, wow, this is really like cool, introspective, self-reflecting thing. Like, is he yet another character that's haunted by his past? It felt like the magical equivalent of being in bed and trying to sleep, but you can't because you keep thinking about embarrassing things you did in the past. Yeah, I can relate, Atreus, I can relate. But then this sequence leads to my least favourite part of the game by far. The part of the game that I'm going to call the Jotunheim Saga. Okay, to summarise it all, Atreus gets teleported to Jotunheim, where he meets a manic pixie dream girl called Angerboda. Or should I say manic giant dream girl, because that's right, she is a giant too. And to be fair, she does tell him quite a lot of interesting stuff about how she's the one that paints the murals, well, her and her family. She also explains where the giants have gone, basically into a bunch of Pokeballs. And even shows him the most recent prophecy painting where Kratos dies.
No.
And you might be saying, well, that sounds all very interesting and important to the story, what's the problem here? You see, the problem is, it takes forever. Every time you think you're done, it's like, oh yeah, one more thing. And then you're there for another like hour. It's like the ending for Return of the King. It's like, let's wrap it up lads, let's move on, shall we? And it's so annoying because she gets you doing like chores for her. You go around collecting some fucking fruit and she screams like this to attract her yak. It's like, come on, it was clearly right round the corner. And then there's this one. It's like, it's right there. You could whisper and it would hear you. I feel so bad for that yak, it must be so sick of her shit. And then when you're done with the fruit, she's like, oh, now I need stuff for my paint, let's go pick that as well. And I get what they're doing, they want there to be some time so they can develop a relationship. But it all comes off as very cheesy and very like Pixar. And the longer it goes on, the more you start to notice the bad things about the game. Basically, you just start to recognise the gameplay patterns. You come into a new area, kill the enemies, hear a little bit of lore, do a little puzzle to get to the next area, and then it's rinse and repeat. And all of that is usually fine because you're interested in what's going on around that pattern. But if you're not interested, then it just starts to drag, it becomes monotonous, repetitive, and you just can't wait for it to end. And when you do think it's finally over, oh wait no, her grandma's here, let's go sort this fucking situation out. I mean, to be honest, the whole situation with her grandma is really interesting. Like, she's lost her mind a bit, and then you go into a house and it's like an actual giant's house. Then you implant a giant soul into a big dead snake via the Wi-Fi. You just sort of transfer it over or something. And then you have this pretty fun novelty boss fight where you have to shoot the bottom of the cauldron and then dodge these big area attacks that are like highlighted on the floor. It's really fun. And then there's this really fucking heavy moment at the end where the grandma goes off spitting this crazy shit to Angerboda.
You are nothing, and no one will ever remember you. Not even Loki. You'll just be a forgotten chapter in his story. I see you again. You wish you died with your parents.
And then you're just like, oh shit, that was a lot to take in. Like, she's gonna need time. This is gonna be like a really dark part now. And it is, to be fair, for about 10 to 15 seconds. And then they have a wacky race. Like, I get what you're doing. You're trying to change her mind and cheer her up. But come on, man. I feel like it sort of ruined that previous scene by how much she's sort of over it immediately. Then after this, you finally go home by ripping off the Wizard of Oz. Since I've already mentioned Angerboda, let's talk about all the other new characters. I've already mentioned Odin and Thor, but we also meet the rest of Thor's family, his last remaining child and his wife, who are both very interesting in their own right, because Thrud wants to be a Valkyrie, but Sif doesn't want her to. It does sort of mirror Kratos and Atreus in a way, where the kid wants to go out and live their dreams, but the parent is a little bit too overprotective, but for the kid's own good. Then you've got Tyr, who I'll bring up later. Then you've got Freya's brother Freya, which is spelled how an app company would spell the name Freya. And he's your average charming but a little bit incompetent dashing rogue type. He's kind of whatever, you know. And then you've got the best character in the whole fucking game, baby. That's right, I'm talking about Ratatoska. Voiced by Sungwon Cho, aka ProZD, I'm a big fan. Give me the spin-off game where I just play as him the whole time. I don't want to play as Atreus anymore.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time tinkering up and down the river.
And then you have Ellie from the Borderlands games. Oh, sorry, I mean Lunda. But they're basically the same character. Then there's Heimdall, who's basically like Prince Charming from Shrek if he was even more of a smug dickhead. And finally, the real best character, the little mushroom men you see on the tree. I mean, look at this one waving at me, oh my god. Okay, game of the year, wrap it up boys, we've seen enough. And before I talk more about the plot and wrap this video up, there's a few small things here and there that I just want to touch on. First being that I always find it funny how whenever there's a big chest, these huge, like, glowing, important looking chests, and then Kratos walks up, pushes the lid off, pulls out a tiny little bag and goes about his day. It's like, mate, there's clearly a shitload of other things in there, what are you doing? And who's putting all that stuff there anyway? The next thing being my actual favourite side quest, which is when Atreus and Kratos do some father-son bonding at a theme park. They go on this big roller coaster and it starts going crazy and Atreus freaks out because he's a little bitch. And then the ride's over and some friendly troll tries to get you out of the carriage, and then Kratos just kills him in an instant. It's like, bro, he's just doing his job, alright? You might have a wife and kid at home, you don't know. And then they go on a log flume to calm themselves down. And it was really nice, you know, as long as you're not that troll, but other than that, it was sweet. And then on the way home on a raft, Atreus resurrects an old meme.
Whoa, what are those?
I mean, he's like 13, what do you expect? Actually, you know what, fun fact, after this part of the mission, where you're escaping from the mines on the raft, the game makes you spam X to like pull the chains faster. But I paused it halfway, and then when I came back, the little X notification just wouldn't go away. And there were quite a few little bugs like that, like nothing game breaking, but they were there. Something I'm sure everyone's really annoyed with is how little time they give you to solve a puzzle before someone blurts something out. It's like you see a puzzle and then Atreus has instantly got like that red face meme because he can't wait to fucking say what the answer is. And then one thing that I'm sure everyone's made a joke about, but how the fuck does Mimir get severely motion sick? I mean, come on man, he's strapped to the arse of someone that's constantly fighting and running and climbing. Get this man a sick bag. Okay, then let's talk about the plot. So the overarching theme in this game is clearly fate versus carving your own path in life. And then there's the whole self-fulfilling prophecy thing, where someone tries so hard to avoid a prophecy that they cause the prophecy to happen. And that is almost what Atreus did. Like when he goes and throws a little hissy fit and then runs off to Asgard because he thinks he can trick Odin and save the day. But to be fair, Odin was playing him the whole time. I mean, Odin really hit this boy with the whole Dennis system, hook, line and sinker. There was even a little bit of like Anakin and Palpatine thing there. It was like, oh, I could give you the power to save the ones you love, blah blah blah. But thankfully, Atreus stuck to his guns and did the right thing. But enough about Atreus, what about the other characters? For other characters, there's more overarching themes like regret, like we've touched on before, coming to terms with who you were as a person, and still moving forward with a positive outlook. And then there's this whole quest where Freya wants to free herself from the ties that Odin has wrapped around her. And you have this crazy fight with Nidhogg, one of the best in the game. And then there's this crazy cutscene where she's like frantically and desperately trying to cut away the ties and finally free herself from Odin's grasp, which I'm sure that anyone that's been in a toxic relationship can relate to. It's like, damn, yeah, get out there, girl, live your best life. And as I've said before, the voice acting, oh, chef's kiss, so good. Man, Freya's such a cool character, and not just because I think she's a stone cold fox. It's like she found it in herself to forgive Kratos for killing her son. And then there's this other side quest where she comes to terms with the fact that she'll always be part of Asgard, and that's okay because Odin can't ruin it for her anymore. It's just damn good character development is what it is. Another thing this game is about family, because obviously you've got Kratos and Atreus, you've got Freya and her brother, and obviously Balder. You've got Thor trying to be a better man and not be an alcoholic for his wife and daughter. You've got Sindri and Brock and all this shit they went through for each other. I mean shit, even those jellyfish wanted to go start a family. And speaking of Sindri and Brock, alright, let's talk about the rest of the plot. So near the beginning of the game, you go and free Tyr, who's supposed to be this other god of war who's going to help you fight Odin, but he's like completely broken as a person and just doesn't want to fight anymore, which yeah, I can understand that. But then he's constantly like ruining your plans, trying to naysay everything you do. And then you're like, why did I free this guy again? Why are we still keeping him around? And then, oh shit, turns out it was Odin the whole time. And then he shanks my boy Brock, what the fuck? When I was first playing, this twist caught me completely by surprise. But when I was like going through my footage and editing this, there are a couple hints and signs here or there. One of the main ones being when you take Tyr to Alfheim, and then he hears about the prophecy of Ragnarok being a lie, and then he gets all mad and fucking pushes past Atreus. It's like, Jesus, calm down, dude. But when you know it's Odin, it makes sense. That crafty one-eyed bastard. Fucking Brock's dead. Sindri, who's like my favourite character actually, goes through so much to help Kratos and Atreus. There's this really sweet scene where he's talking to Atreus and giving him advice about sleeping, and he puts his arm around him to comfort him, even though he's like a germaphobe and a clean freak. And how does his kindness be repaid? Well, Atreus turns into a bear, mauls him, and then later on the guy they brought into his house stabs and kills his brother. And then at the end, Sindri is justifiably pretty fucking broken inside. And it is so hard to watch, man. It's such a hard time seeing such a nice, good character just be shattered. It really is heartbreaking. But anyway, after Brock dies and that whole cat's out of the bag about Tyr being fucking Odin the whole time, the only option left is war. That's right, the prophecy was true. Actually, something I should mention is the scene where they go to these Norns who are like predict the future, but they're like complete snarky bitches the whole time. It's like, you have really cool power, but you have to be a dick about it, come on. However, I did enjoy this comment, which was basically a perfect way to summarize the new God of War games.
He still slays gods, but now he's sad about it?
But anyway, where were we? Oh yeah, war. And this whole time on the build-up, you're thinking like, are they actually going to kill off Kratos? Like, these prophecies seem to be pretty spot on so far. Even in this game of us killing Heimdall, we are kind of doing everything they said we would. Oh, real quick, one tiny detail. After Kratos kills Heimdall and then goes to pick up the Gjallarhorn but misses the first try because he's like flustered and like full of adrenaline. Oh, that's such a brilliant little touch. But anyway, I digress. Kratos finally agrees to be the general of the war, even though he said he hated war the whole game. And there's this scene where he's like trying to get to sleep, and then Atreus comes into his tent and he tells him a bedtime story. And you're like, holy shit, he's gonna die, isn't he? And then he falls asleep himself and has another vision about his wife Faye. And then she hits him with this.
To grieve deeply is to have loved fully. Open your heart to the world as you have opened it to me, and you will find every reason to keep living in it.
I'm not ashamed to say I teared up after that scene. It was such beautiful dialogue. Like, sometimes the dialogue in this game can be a little bit too quippy, a little bit too Marvel sometimes. But when the dialogue in this game is good, it's fucking good. It was just such a beautiful scene. And then at this point I was like fully ready for Kratos to die. And then he has this rousing speech and it feels so fucking epic and the music's so good. And then he blows the Gjallarhorn and you're like, oh, here we go. And then I'm kind of sorry to say the ending was pretty anticlimactic. Like, you're fighting your way to the big wall of Asgard and you see like enemies you've fought throughout the entire game. And you do see like in the background you see like Thor fighting Jormungandr and like all the elves and Valkyries and shit, and that is really cool. And don't get me wrong, when I was actually playing the game I thought it was like the most amazing thing I've ever seen. But that's because I was so caught up in the hype and the emotion that it was just like blinding me to what was actually happening. And that's that it felt pretty rushed. Like, it all happens so quick. And then there's the whole thing with Surtur about he's going to be the giant primordial thing that's going to destroy Asgard. There's this little mission beforehand where you go and meet him, and we're like, oh, we need you to be a giant Ragnarok thing and bring down the Great Wall of Asgard. Then he starts hitting you back with dialogue that feels like it's straight out of fucking Guardians of the Galaxy or some shit.
Magic, primordial stuff. I'll get big, smash stuff. You'll like it.
But then you stab him in the heart with your Rage Blades, and he's like, alright, cool, this is gonna work. See you on game day, boys. And you're like, alright, sweet, that's sorted out. And then when it gets to it, we don't even use him to break down the wall. A fucking revenge demon that is Sindri just pulls out another magical trinket out of nowhere and blows up the wall's weak spot. It's like, yeah, I know it was hinted at that the wall's got a weak spot, but what was the point of fucking Surtur? Then after that, it's time for the rematch with Thor. But that was anticlimactic as well. Like, compared to the first one, it was nowhere near the spectacle. But at least it ends with a strong emotional standpoint, where Thor finally breaks free from his father's control. And then he dies. Oh well, never mind. But then even the fight with Odin isn't amazing. I mean, it's not bad, I felt like it should have been more important feeling. There are multiple cool phases and you're fighting them all as like a trio. It did feel very Goku, Frieza and Android 17 fighting Jiren, but in retrospect, it definitely could have been a lot better. A way to improve it, I would say, is that there's this mask that Odin wants to complete and find, so he can peer through the veil and find out all the secrets of life. And that's like his entire motivation in this game as far as I can tell. And yet he has the completed mask and nothing happens. In my opinion, there should have been a thing where he looks through the veil and then his whole head is like full of knowledge he shouldn't know, and then the last stage of the fight being him as this like eldritch monster. Now that would have been a fucking climax. But they didn't do that. We just sort of beat him regularly, and then Atreus uses the Master Ball on him, and then Sindri comes in, hits him with a dank one-liner, and then releases him via the PC. So yeah, that happened. It is a cool detail though that Sindri's still covered in Brock's blood. It just shows how destroyed he is as a person that he's not going to clean off all this blood. But oh no, watch out, here comes Surtur. Yeah, I guess no one bothered to go and turn him off or something, or tell him that he's not needed anymore. And so Freya basically sacrifices himself to save everybody else, even though none of this should have happened in the first place. If I was Freya, I'd be pissed, because that's now my son and my brother you basically got killed. And Kratos didn't die. I mean, I'm happy he didn't die. But this whole time they were like teasing that he's gonna die, and then they just sort of pull the rug from underneath you, like, ah, nah, he's fine, don't worry about it. Now I don't know how to feel. I was prepared for it mentally, I thought they were gonna do the whole Last of Us 2 thing, but no, he lives. But at least on the plus side, in the last scene where he sees a prophecy painting of him being like worshipped as a god and not feared as a monster, that was actually really nice. Kratos did finally get a happy ending. Good for him, the guy's been through a lot, let him just relax and just build stuff and help people. But that's the end, and I'm really happy with it. I don't know where they're going to go from here. I see people saying that they want to see God of War in Japan or like Egyptian mythology, but Kratos is clearly happy where he is now, like rebuilding and helping people. Let the guy rest for God's sake. And I hope it's not a situation where Atreus takes up the mantle of God of War somewhere, no thank you. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But that's the end of God of War Ragnarok. And I think this game is exactly what it needed to be. It's the deep like maelstrom of a story that really pulls you under. And even though I was getting bored of the gameplay and the enemies, when the game did end, I just wanted it to keep going. Because I cared so much about the characters and their stories and motivations. That's when you know you've played a damn good game. Is it perfect? No. But as this game has shown, nobody's perfect, and that's fine. I love this game. Thank you for watching.